Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the Senior Minister.
Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the Senior Minister.
Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the Senior Minister.
Humanist congregation, and this is Coffee and Wisdom, when we look through a little bit about American culture, world religions, etc., looking at some streams that are feeding into American cultural thought, American spiritual and religious thought, and also into humanism itself. Yesterday, I was talking about the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago that led to the World Parliament of Religions, that led to the introduction of this fellow over here, and giving an amazing speech at the end that really shut down the whole concept of white Protestant Christianity being the be-all and end all of how religion should be in the world. It was a real wake-up call that Christian colonialism was not going to win the world over, and the world's peoples were not seeing Christianity as the only answer to religious and spiritual problems. Now, I want to back up a little bit today and look at Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, 1836 to 1886. He's not known in the U.S. popular culture anyway, although he's an extremely important figure in the development of Hinduism and Hinduism in the United States. He was the guru, the teacher for Vivekananda. So he was a priest of Kali, and one of the amazing things about Ramakrishna is that he wasn't an educated person, he wasn't a middle-class person, he was just a temple devotee who was doing his duty and becoming a priest of Kali. Kali is the great female principle in the universe, according to Hindu thought. The name Kali means time, and reflect in Greek thought that the father of time is Chronos, where we get chronological. Well, in Hindu thought, it's Kali, the mother of time, and time then is understood as this thing that actually creates reality. So time is the mother of the universe. She's looking very fierce here, but what she's really subduing is evil in the world. So she is fiercely resisting evil and helping us out, even though she looks a little bit wild here with human heads as a necklace and human hands as a belt. And standing on this poor guy and beheading someone looks terrible, but actually she is a very positive force in the universe because she's always fighting evil all the time. All right. So Ramakrishna becomes a temple devotee and priest of Kali, and begins to study the basics with people. I don't think he could even read. Maybe he could read a little bit, but basically he's talking to people, learning about various Hindu strains, and thinking through how all of these fit together. One question that people do ask when we talk about Hinduism is Hinduism polytheistic or monotheistic? And the answer is yes, yes and no. Basically, the British, when they invaded and occupied India, declared that these Indians were practicing something that they called Hinduism. Hinduism was completely different in different, even villages, but certainly different north to south. In the north, it had been affected by Islam and by the Buddha, who, of course, was Indian. And so these very different ideas were floating around in Hinduism. And you really can't say that there is a Hinduism. There are streams of Hindu thought. And one of the questions consistently is Hinduism polytheistic or monotheistic? Because, hey, this is Kali here, but there are all these other manifestations of the god or gods, whichever it is. And it is different in different understandings of Hinduism. Now, Ramakrishna was a devotee of practice, not study. And this is something important, again, within the Hindu tradition. It's called Bakhti. And Bhakti in Hindu tradition is doing something instead of, again, reading, studying, philosophizing, etc. A Bhakti practice is the American style of yoga that's very popular in yoga studios across the US. It's all about sculpting the body and exercising and these kinds of things in the popular imagination. That's a doing kind of yoga. There are other kinds of yoga. Yoga in Sanskrit comes from the same root as yoke. It is tying yourself to the divine in some way, but there are many ways to yoga yourself to the divine principle, bhakti being one of them, the different physical movements, etc. So Ramakrishna was a practicer of the tradition, not someone who's been philosophizing about it. And also, he was interested in these other strains that are coming into India in the 19th century. So he practiced Islam. He said, you know, what do Muslims do? I'm going to do that for a while. Then he practiced Christianity. I'm going to practice Christianity. What do they do? And I'm going to do that for a while. And eventually, he began to align himself with a movement that was developing independently called the Brahmo Samaj. And the Brahmo Samaj is still very much alive in India, and it was a what I would call the Unitarian movement within Hinduism itself. All right. Now, one of the things that the Brahmo Samaj and Ramakrishna are coming out of is the Vedas. The Vedas are the most sacred of all Hindu writing. One of the first verses is, truth is one, sages call it by various names. And if you've been following along, you know very well that this is part of what's been feeding into American culture in the 1940s and 50s, that there's one mountain, many paths, and there is a big T truth out there, and that is part of the Rig Veda idea. The Brahmo Samaj is again, sort of Unitarian movement. It's still very much alive. You can buy a t-shirt even now saying you are a proud Brahmo Samaj Hindu. What does that mean? The Brahmo Samaj, again, 19th century, scriptures are not divinely inspired. Guess what? Sounds a lot like Unitarianism in the 19th century, doesn't it? Avatars are imaginary. So those gods, those appearances of the various deities, those are all just in the human imagination. They don't actually exist. The Brahmo Samaj says we are monotheistic. There is one overarching God in the universe. They are also anti-tradition. One being sati, in which the widow would leap on the burning funeral pyre of her husband and thus die. The Brahmo Samaj was against that kind of thing. Also, again, tradition, they were anti-caste system. The caste system is old-fashioned, it's wrong, and we're not going to practice that in modern India, they said. All right. Karma and reincarnation are probably imaginary, just like Unitarians began to say, you know, I'm not sure there is such a thing as heaven. Maybe there's an afterlife. Maybe there's not. We don't know. So the Brahmo Samaj is going in the same direction with that. Karma, reincarnation, the very bases of traditional Hinduism are all probably imaginary, made up by human beings. Also, they were very strong on educating women. Again, in the 19th century, that wasn't done in Indian culture, but they insisted upon it. So you can see how they were a liberalizing force. So when Ramakrishna accepts the Brahmo Samaj way of doing it, we have a traditional priest saying, wait a minute, I think those ideas are a good idea. The Vedas talk about it in this way, and that's the way I'm going to go. So Vivekananda becomes a dedicated disciple of Ramakrishna. He goes on a spiritual journey to visit this now famous guy and becomes a disciple. And then he learns this particular form of very, very liberal and modernistic Hinduism. And that's what he brought to the United States in 1893. So if you go into a Vedantic temple here in the US today, you will most likely see this shrine. And what's going to be on the shrine is Ramakrishna and his most famous devotee, Vivekananda. And here on the right, that is Sarada Deva, that is the wife of Ramakrishna, also considered a saint in the Hindu tradition, and very much, again, about women's liberation and women's freedom within this traditionalist society. So the Brahmo Samaj, and that's how Vivekananda was able to talk to, especially people like Unitarians in the US. And there was certainly this idea that, oh, I think we are indeed talking about the same idea of liberalizing, getting past tradition. The most famous Brahmo Samaj person is probably Rabindranath Tagore. He won the Nobel Prize in poetry. And he said this: "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy." And yeah, how Unitarian is that? If you want to learn more about how Hindu ideas come into the United States, there's a great book on the subject, American Veda, from Emerson, ding ding, to the Beatles, ding ding, and yoga and meditation, how Indian spirituality changed the West, by Philip Goldberg. It's a brilliant book, and again, yep, goes all the way back to those transcendentalists and watches how Hindu thought slowly comes into the U.S., for good and bad, yoga studios to very serious meditation and all of it. The American Veda. It's a brilliant book, and it's a very fun read if you're interested in American cultural things. Thank you so much for listening this week. You can join us on Sunday at 10:30 a.m. for our assembly. That's Central Time. This week, we will have our water celebration, in which we celebrate a brand new program year at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis. You can find out lots of stuff about us right here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can help us out financially by going to firstunitarian.org/donate or PayPal. See you on Sunday, or I'll see you next Monday at 9 a.m. Central Time. Thank you.